stories and try to set the pace for the week and what has been happening. We had taken a 2-week recess. We are back for the year. We are about to talk about what will be making or has been making headlines in the last 2 days or so. That is, of course, a big story. President Uhuru Kenyatta's new cabinet or new look cabinet, which he announced on Friday afternoon, retaining only 6 out of the 19 cabinet secretaries. We shall be taking a look at what will be happening. What is the fate of the 13? Have they been dropped? Most people seem to think they have been sacked. Of course, we understand because of interested parties. That is why the president will be making the rest of the announcements later on. But we shall be taking a look at that later on. We want to take a look at what's happening in the newspapers very quickly. A lot of the stories about the cabinet. Let me introduce my guests in the studio with me this morning. I have with me Dismas Mokua, political risk analyst, Mark Bichache, and Hesbon Owila, and political strategist Mutinda Kavemba. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Great. Let's before we get into the cabinet, there's a story here on the Sunday Standard, an interview exclusive with the Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka, and the headline is Kalonzo saying, "I want to have a chat with Uhuru." This is NASA co-principal wanting to meet the President Uhuru Kenyatta and his co-principal Raila Odinga on face-to-face talks to resolve the political crisis in the aftermath of the 2017 election. This is his first candid interview since he jetted back to the country from Germany 2 weeks ago. He seems to be saying that the swearing in of himself and Raila Odinga should be a kind of a last resort. Dismas, what is your take on this development?
Well, it's very clear, and the NASA leadership understands the train has left the station, that President Kenyatta is in office till 2022. And I think there will go 3 issues that they'd like to address with the president.
Right.
On the issue of having a referendum. And the president cannot agree to have a referendum till there's a round-table conversation. And that's what the NASA leadership has been talking all about, that the president needs to create the environment for them to have a conversation and look at 3 things. Number 1, to sanitize our elections, so that in future, when you go for an election, we behave like the Germans do. That there's an election while there's a marathon. That if you're a farmer in Kisii, you can actually go vote in the morning, in the evening you go back to your farm. And an election shouldn't create the nation to come into a standstill. So that's something important that the president needs to create time for. And then number 2, review whether our presidential system is actually meeting our needs, whether we need to go for a parliamentary system, so that after an election, in the unlikely event that your party does not win, then you can become the leader of you can be the opposition leader, and then you can form a shadow cabinet. And the issue of inclusivity. And in my view, those are very solid issues that the president needs to create time for. And given the fact that he's not going to ask for votes anymore, he can afford to be like a lame duck president, make decisions not only appealing to his power base, but appealing to the entire nation.
Right.
And I see no reason why President Kenyatta shouldn't create time for that.
Mark, will the president be keen on such a meeting from where you sit?
I doubt it highly, because I think the president's mind is quite elaborately set out in all of his speeches in the last 2-3 months. And his focus is on his legacy and what is called the Big Four. So the kind of negotiations that the president wants, I would imagine, are negotiations and talks about how do we improve the economic, infrastructural, and health well-being of the nation. He is very focused on getting work done. And he feels like that talking about the political environment around this nation is a waste of time. As Dismas as well put it, the horses are bolted. That is, there's no point discussing how many horses were in the
Isn't this
before.
a chance for him to avoid the scenario where a parallel president is being sworn in?
The question is, does he need to avoid it? You see, like I've said here before, Raila's swearing in can have as little consequence as 0 based on how Jubilee treats it. If the Jubilee government ignores Raila's swearing in, he can get sworn in every day for the next year, 365 days, and it will have no impact at all. And that's the issue. NASA has very little cartridge left in its gun, and they need to be very careful how they use their last bullets.
All right.
But let me allow me to buttress this point. And it's erroneous for us to imagine that you can work on the economic agenda if you've not sorted out the political tensions. That is a fallacy that we must run away from. In as much as Bichache is indicating that for the NASA leadership, they no longer have any weapons left, Raila alone has got the capacity of making this country ungovernable for the next 5 years without taking a break. Their supporters are so furious, they're annoyed, they're running all over the town naked, others are looking for Bibles. Wherever they spot Raila Odinga, they want him to be sworn in. So he's got a constituency which is nervous, which most of the time is irrational, and they're waiting for the flick of his finger to act. So for anybody to say there are the political tensions, you can just ignore them, and then you start working on the economics. Right. That one will never, ever happen. Even for the president, and he's come up with the big four, his agenda item, which is very solid. That one will become, it will be a conversation that will never, ever succeed unless you have every Kenyan reading from the same big book.
Husband, will Raila Odinga be keen for this kind of a sit-down at this
I think, to some extent, you see that the NASA fraternity is actually keen, on having a way forward that is a lot more inclusive and that will disseminate, dissipate the political tension, which you must give them credit for. You listen to what Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka was talking about, and you get a sense in which they're actually offering President Uhuru Kenyatta and the entire Jubilee fraternity a golden bridge. In essence, what they're telling them, in as much as we are going for a negotiation, we acknowledge the fact that, you are the president, and for the next 5 years, you're going to be the president of this country. But it is incumbent upon you to ensure that if you're going to address the 4 key pillars that you have, you must also address the healing process. You must also address, harmony within, different members of this country, whether they supported you or not. And I think it is important that the president and the Jubilee administration understands this. You might think that they have the reins of power and all they have to do is to just give NASA the cold, treatment. I don't think it will be easy to move forward. You look at the tension everywhere you go. Like over the week, I went to one of the malls, and people have this pent-up emotion, and they're just waiting for something to trigger it. When you find somebody who's frustrated in a supermarket and he makes statements like "mulituibia kura, hamtaweza," you get an understanding that there is still something that needs to be done. And the fact that NASA is acknowledging the centrality of President Kenyatta in addressing this is credit to NASA.
Mutinda, what is your take on this?
My take is that it is good that there seems to be some toning down on the threat by NASA. And talks are good, and talks don't have to be very disruptive. The demand for talks also doesn't have to be very disruptive. You remember very well that in the last electoral cycle, 2013 to 2017, there was some agreement, there was some push for electoral reforms. And at some point, they even agreed to have a bipartisan approach. You remember there is the committee that was chaired by Honorable Orengo, co-chaired by Honorable Orengo and Honorable Kiraito. No one went to the streets to get that. So the thing is, I wouldn't stop them from demanding for talks, but I would urge them not to push on the threats of disrupting order so that they force for the talks. Because it is clear, you've asked whether Raila is for the talks. The truth of the matter is that even the threats of swearing in are being used to demand for talks. So in essence, what NASA wants is the talks. So as a common wananchi, our appeal to them would be to avoid an approach that would disrupt the social order, that would affect the day-to-day lives of majority of Kenyans who actually are not politicians and who would want to go on with their lives. So the thing is, asking for talks and asking for it, probably in the way that Kalonzo is now starting to do, I think that is much more commendable than the approach of giving threats.
All right.
Yes.
All right. A lot of the stories in the local newspaper dailies this morning is about the cabinet and different reactions and analysis of the new look cabinet. We'll talk about that in a short while. But before we do that, let's talk about some other changes that the president did make on Friday, and that is in the police service. Ndego Muhoro, Joel Kitili out in the police checkup. The president making sweeping changes affecting top officials both at State House and, of course, in the National Police Service. Did you expect this, especially Ndego Muhoro and Joel Kitili, dismiss?
Well, that was not expected. The expectation was that Kinudhi Ambuga was going to be confirmed, because initially wanted, he lost in the Jubilee primaries and was going to run against Lee Kinyanjui, but he was told to stay calm, that he's going to be rewarded. So, and in my view, that is the most significant announcement or nomination which came from State House. Yes. Because you see, for people say that Mr. Kinudhi Ambuga is a very wealthy man. He understands the public service like the back of his hand, and he understands the security space in Kenya very well. And also, people who've had the opportunity of going to State House say there was a bit of indiscipline in that neighborhood. And he's probably the only person who can restore that sanity. He's the only person who can discipline everybody there. Because public servants have got a strange way of working, that if they have no regards for you, if they've not seen you being part of the system for so long, and you start giving instructions left, right, and center, they're not going to take you seriously. It's the same thing which happens with the appointment of the deputy head of the public service, Mr. Wanyama. He's been in the system, he understands it very well. And we look forward to a very efficient public service that is going to be delivering to the needs and aspirations of Kenyans. But for the police service, it was very surprising. And you remember Mr. Moore has had altercations with almost everybody in Kenya. We've had so many incidences of murder that remains unsorted out. You recall at some stage there were altercations between him and the lawyer, Ahmed Nasir Abdullahi, over the Tattoo project. So there are so many things. And many people actually were very happy. They were very happy. A number of them drank through the night when they saw that Moore has gone. But one hopes that the new person who has taken over is going to be serving the needs and aspirations again of Wanjiku. That is not going to be serving the needs of just a few people in the public sector. But again, the bigger issue is, when we came up with our new constitution, or rather the 2010 constitution, people were hoping that the Kenyan Police Service, the AP, everybody was going to have some independence, that there was going to be security of tenure, that when you are serving, you're actually serving at the pleasure of the people of the Republic of Kenya, not at the pleasure of the president. Now all the top police officers serve at the pleasure of the president, and one wonders whether or not they can take independent decisions. Maybe that's something that the NASA leadership is supposed to place on the table, so that when they're having a conversation with President Kenyatta, we ask ourselves, is the police leadership supposed to serve at the pleasure of President Kenyatta or at the pleasure of Wananchi?
All right. Some other changes in State House, of course. Joseph Kinyua being retained as head of public service to be deputized by Elema Musiambo, as you said. And then Nzioka Waita will now serve as chief of staff and head of the presidential delivery unit. As you've said, Kinudhi Ambuga, former Nakuru governor, status controller, replacing Lawrence Lenayapa. Some of those changes, what impact are these said to have on State House?
One of the key things that President Uhuru is trying to do, everyone talks about a legacy term, and we must ask ourselves, what does it take to deliver a legacy term? You need a mix of two things. Number one, you need a mix of people like Kinyo, who've been in civil service for a long time and can have a reign on the civil service and how it works. But you also need the White and Ziokas who are able to work through a delivery-based system. His experience in Safaricom means that he's used to working in an environment where there's a target that's set at the beginning of the year, and you must meet that target. But also, one of the things that, if you look very carefully about what Uhuru is doing, he's realized that positions at high office also have a political inclination. In other words, you cannot have a cabinet secretary who is not politically savvy, because at the end of the day, government is a political organ of the nation of Kenya. So what you're seeing the president trying to do is trying to set up a team that has both old and new, that is, number one, able to deliver on what he's looking for in terms of the big four, but also, and saliently, and there's a mention on this on page 8 of the Standard, where he talks about corruption. One of the things that the president has to deal with, if he's going to have a lasting legacy, if the big four is not going to have a big stain, is the corruption. And how you deal with corruption is bringing fresh blood that is expected to be anti the culture that is already there within government. So I think that's what the president is trying to do in all these appointments.
All right, Hesbon, your take on the president pulling a plug on some of these top policemen?
Well, I think just like Dismas mentioned, there is a level in which you require discipline within the corridors of power, and you need somebody who has a track record, who has been part and parcel of the system, who will talk with authority. And the entry of Kinuthia Mbuthia, for instance, Bugwe, for instance, is a good indicator that the president actually means business. He wants sanity at State House. You also get a feel that he's looking at his legacy. He's looking at people who will deliver, who are not necessarily politically savvy. Folks like, Zio Kawaita, and the fact that the president has 4 key pillars and he wants to see that one delivered. I think he has a folk there who is probably going to do a great job if given a political environment that would allow him to do that job.
All right. Mutinda, the policemen, especially replacing the Ndego Mohoro, Joel Kutili, and Samuel Arachi, and some of them, George Kinoti is supposed to replace the DCI. Noor Gabo will be the Deputy IG in charge of Administration Police, and Edward Mbogwa, Deputy Inspector General.
At least for Arachi and for Mohoro, I think actually their terms were almost coming to an end. But, for Kitili just went there the other day. But this also tells you that there are some things that the president was probably not very happy with that were happening in the police force. With time, probably it is going to come out exactly what it was. Mm-hmm. But that was lack of confidence in the top leadership. You can imagine, actually, the out of the top 4, 3 have been taken to the civil service for redeployment. So that tells you that there is something that the president was not very happy about how the police was being run. And you know, 2 of the leaders of the formations, the administration police and regular police, mm-hmm. have gone home. That is quite a move. And there must be some sound reasons why he did that. And, bottom line is that he was not satisfied with the way they've been going about doing their jobs.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. You're watching Sunday Edition. Thank you for staying with us here on KTN News. We're taking a quick commercial break. When we return, we take a look at Uhuru Kenyatta's new look cabinet, the 6 ministers who